She gave me an ultimatum on a Thursday night. The kind of night when the rain sounds like static against the windows and everything feels heavier than it should. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, half listening to the low hum of the TV when she said it. Her voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Either you change, or I'll find someone who will give me what I need. For a second, I thought she was joking. The tone, the timing, it didn't feel real. But when I looked up and saw the cold in her eyes, I realized she wasn't bluffing. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just said, okay, find them. And I meant it. The silence that followed was the longest I'd ever felt. She blinked, waiting for me to chase, to explain, to fold. But I didn't move. She stormed off, muttering something about me being heartless, and the door slammed so hard the picture frame above the mantel rattled. That sound stayed with me longer than her words. That night, I sat there with a half-finished can of Bud Light and the faint glow from the Samsung TV reflecting off the glass table. I thought about how strange it was to love someone who always made you feel like a project to fix. Like I was never enough unless I was changing into something she could control. Her name was Jessica. When we met, she was spontaneous, full of life, always chasing adventure. I fell for that energy, that spark. But somewhere along the way, that fire turned cold. Every little thing became a test. If I didn't text fast enough, I was distant. If I worked late, I was avoiding her. I spent years walking on eggshells, believing that if I just tried harder, she'd love me like she used to. But as I sat in that empty apartment, something shifted. For the first time, her threat didn't scare me, it freed me. There's a strange calm that comes when you finally stop trying to prove your worth to someone determined not to see it. She didn't text that night, or the next. But on the third day, my phone lit up with her name. The message was short. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time, feeling that old instinct to fix things clawing at me. But then I remembered her words. Change, or I'll find someone else. And for once, I decided to change, not for her, but for me. The silence became her punishment long before I realized it was my peace. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Jessica. I didn't answer. I poured my coffee into a chipped mug from Starbucks, the one she always said I should throw out because it looked cheap. It was strange how something so small suddenly felt like rebellion. The apartment was quiet, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel heavy. Just still. By noon, she texted again. I didn't mean it like that. Then another message. We need to talk. The old me would have dropped everything, driven across town just to keep the peace. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not after the ultimatum. I left her messages on read and went about my day. I stopped by Home Depot to pick up paint for the living room. Something I'd wanted to do for months, but she always complained it wasn't our priority. Now it was mine. That night, I ordered Chinese takeout and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker across the street. My phone buzzed again. Her name lit up, followed by a voice message. I didn't listen right away. I let it sit there, like a ghost tapping at the door. When I finally pressed play, her voice was shaking. I didn't expect you to just let go. I thought you'd fight for me. You always fight for me. There it was, the script she'd repeated every time she pushed too far. But I wasn't playing my old role anymore. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet. There's a power in restraint, in not explaining your piece to someone who profits from your chaos. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment. I saw her reflection in the Ring camera before she even knocked. She was standing there with that mix of anger and confusion that always came when she lost control. I didn't open the door. She texted me from the porch. You're really not going to talk to me? I typed out a response and deleted it. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Hours later, she left. I watched her drive away from the window, her taillights fading into the night. That's when it hit me. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. Completely done. But that kind of peace never lasts long. The next morning, I found out she wasn't ready to let me go as easily as I'd let her. I woke up to a dozen missed calls and a flood of messages that looked more like panic than pride. Jessica wasn't used to being ignored. Every text followed the same rhythm. Apology, accusation, apology again. You're acting childish. Then, I miss you. Then, you'll regret this. It was predictable, almost mechanical. I left my phone on the counter next to my car keys and went for a drive. The highway was empty, the morning sun cutting through the windshield. I stopped at a Shell station for coffee, black, no sugar. I didn't realize how long it had been since I'd done something so ordinary, without her voice dictating the background. Even the hum of the radio felt freeing. There's a strange clarity that comes when the noise fades, and you finally hear your own thoughts again. By the time I got back home, she'd taken it a step further. There was a long message waiting for me, written like a confession and a threat at the same time. She said she'd met someone new, that he listened and understood her. I could almost see her typing it, waiting for the reaction she thought would come. But nothing came. I didn't answer. That night, I sat on the couch with a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels, scrolling through old photos on my iPhone. We looked happy in most of them. Vacations, birthdays, quiet dinners at the Olive Garden. But when I looked closer, I could see the tension behind my own smile, like I'd been posing for a life that wasn't mine anymore. I closed the album. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone knocking. Hard. Relentless. When I opened the door, she was there, hair messy, eyes wild, wearing that old hoodie of mine she once called ugly but comfortable. She looked smaller somehow, like the fight had drained out of her. She said, "You don't get to walk away like that." I didn't reply. I just stepped aside and let her stand there in the silence she'd created. She tried to fill it with excuses, tears, promises. The same words, recycled, desperate. I didn't trust them anymore. I'd spent years chasing her validation like oxygen, and now I couldn't remember why. She left again, slamming the door, but this time it didn't echo. It felt final. I watched her go without moving, without speaking, without breaking. That night, I realized something she hadn't yet. When someone gives you an ultimatum, they never expect you to call it. But once you do, the power shifts forever. It's strange how quickly peace can turn into pressure once someone realizes they've lost control. The day after Jessica showed up at my door, things got quiet again, but not the good kind of quiet. It was the kind that buzzed under your skin, the kind that tells you a storm's still coming. I tried to focus on work, sitting at my desk with a mug of Folgers coffee and the laptop screen glowing in the dark. But every few minutes, my phone lit up with her name. Messages turned to voicemails. Voicemails turned to calls from unknown numbers. I didn't answer any of them. By that evening, I started getting texts from mutual friends. One said she'd been having a hard time. Another hinted that maybe I was being too cold. I didn't defend myself. People always see the one who walks away as the villain, not the one who built the fire. Let them talk. I'd spent years living for perception. Now, I wanted silence. But Jessica wasn't done. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my apartment. Then a soft knock. Not angry this time, hesitant. I looked through the peephole. It was her again, holding a paper bag and a bottle of wine. The kind we used to open on Friday nights after a long week. She stood there for nearly 5 minutes, knocking once every 30 seconds. I didn't move. When she finally gave up, she left the bag at the door and walked away. Inside was a handwritten note. "You said I could find someone else. But I can't. I just want us back." I folded the paper neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Not out of sentimentality, but to remind myself of the moment she realized her games had consequences. The next morning, she posted a photo on Instagram, smiling with someone new at a cafe downtown. The caption read, "Moving on feels good." I saw it. I didn't react, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. Not because I wanted her back, but because I knew exactly what she was doing, trying to provoke me into breaking my calm. I went for a drive instead, down the Pacific Coast Highway, the sound of the wind louder than my thoughts. I didn't need to win anymore. I just needed to stay still long enough to remember who I was before her. But when I got back home, there was a letter taped to my door. And this one wasn't written in apology, it was written in anger. The letter was short, but it cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. "You think silence makes you strong," she wrote, "but it just makes you a coward." The handwriting was shaky, the kind that comes from too much adrenaline and too little sleep. I stood there on my doorstep for a long moment, reading those words over and over, realizing that she still didn't understand. I wasn't avoiding her because I was weak. I was avoiding her because I was finally free. I crumpled the paper and threw it into the trash, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Anger does that. It crawls under your skin even when you think you've outgrown it. I made myself a cup of black coffee, stared at the steam rising from the mug, and thought about all the nights I'd spent defending myself against her accusations, all the ways she twisted love into leverage. This was her last attempt to pull me back into that cycle. But I wasn't stepping into that trap again. Later that day, I got a call from my friend Ethan. He sounded cautious, like he was walking a line. He said Jessica had been telling people that I'd emotionally abandoned her, that she didn't feel safe with me. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. He didn't believe it, but he also didn't know what to say. I told him not to get involved. The truth has a way of surviving longer than gossip ever does. Still, the lie stung. It wasn't about her reputation or mine. It was about how easily people rewrite history when they lose control of the narrative. I spent the next few days staying quiet, going to work, taking long drives with the windows down, watching the world move on. Then one evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I saw her again. Not at my door this time, across the street, standing by her car. She didn't say a word, just looked at me. There was no anger in her face now, just exhaustion, maybe regret. She waited a few seconds, as if hoping I'd come over. I didn't move. After a while, she got in her car and drove away. That night, I sat on the couch, phone buzzing with messages I didn't open. I realized the silence between us had changed. It wasn't her weapon anymore, it was mine. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. People like Jessica don't let go. They wait for weakness. And I could feel her waiting. I thought she was finally gone. Weeks passed, and for the first time in years, I felt something that almost resembled peace. I started running again in the mornings, eating breakfast instead of drinking coffee on an empty stomach, even picking up my guitar, the one that had gathered dust in the corner of my apartment. Life began to feel like it belonged to me again. But peace has a cruel sense of timing. It never lasts long enough to trust it. One night, I came home late from work. My headlights swept across the driveway, and for a split second, I saw her car parked across the street. It was gone before I could be sure. I told myself it was a coincidence. But then it happened again the next night, and the one after that. Always the same car, same spot, same silence. She never approached. She just waited, watching. It's funny how paranoia grows. At first, you try to explain it away. Maybe it's a neighbor's car, maybe you're imagining it. But the unease builds in small ways. The flicker of a shadow in the window, the sound of footsteps behind you that vanish when you turn. You start double-checking locks, keeping lights on longer, scanning every parked car as you drive home. That's what she'd done to me, turned quiet into tension. One morning, I found an envelope on my windshield. No name, no handwriting on the front. Inside, there was a single Polaroid. It was a picture of me, standing by my kitchen window, taken from outside. The photo wasn't threatening, it was worse. It was calm, precise, a reminder that she could reach into my life anytime she wanted. I didn't report it. That's the thing about people like Jessica. You never know how much is obsession and how much is performance. Reporting it might have given her exactly what she wanted, a reaction. So I stayed quiet, watched my surroundings more carefully, moved my desk away from the window. But a few days later, I woke up to something different. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Just 5 words. You were never hard to find. I stared at the screen, feeling that old familiar mix of anger and fear twisting inside me. She wasn't letting go. She was escalating. And for the first time, I wondered if walking away had really ended anything, or just started a different kind of war. I didn't sleep that night. The message sat on my screen like a pulse, glowing in the dark. You were never hard to find. I kept reading it over and over, trying to decide if I should respond or block the number. But blocking her never worked before. She always found a way through. So I did nothing. Silence had become my only weapon. But for the first time, I wasn't sure it was enough. The next morning, I walked outside and felt that strange heaviness in the air again. The kind that tells you someone's watching. My neighbor, Mrs. Cole, was watering her plants and said she'd seen a woman standing by my mailbox around midnight. She thought it was my girlfriend. I just nodded and said nothing. Jessica wasn't my girlfriend anymore. But she didn't seem to understand that. Later that day, I went to a small diner downtown. One of those places that smells like burnt coffee and old leather seats. I sat by the window with a notebook, pretending to write while scanning every reflection in the glass. I could have sworn I saw her walk past outside, hair pulled back, sunglasses covering half her face. She didn't look in, but I knew it was her. You just know. When I got home that evening, there was another envelope. This one was thicker. Inside were printed screenshots, old text conversations, photos of us from years ago, things I hadn't even remembered existed. At the bottom of the stack was a note. Do you ever think about what you lost? That night, I drank too much whiskey and sat staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what her endgame was. Attention? Revenge? Or just the comfort of knowing she still lived somewhere inside my head? Whatever it was, she had it. She'd turned my peace into anticipation, my calm into a waiting room for chaos. The next day, I decided to confront it. Not her, but the part of me that still cared. I deleted her number, burned the old letters she'd left, and cleared out the last drawer that still held her photos. But when I opened the window to let the smoke out, I noticed something on the ledge. A single rose, freshly cut, dew still on the petals. She'd been there. Recently. Close enough to touch the window, close enough to watch me burn the past. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't haunting my life anymore. I was living inside hers. I started noticing the smallest details again. The way my door frame creaked late at night. How footsteps on the stairs sounded just a little too delayed, as if someone was waiting for me to notice. Every sound became a question. Every shadow felt personal. I told myself I was imagining it. That paranoia had settled into my bones, but deep down I knew better. Jessica wasn't done. She was just changing tactics. A few days later, I found something strange. My front door wasn't locked when I came home. I knew I'd locked it. I always did. Inside, nothing seemed missing, but the air felt off, like someone had been there and left in a hurry. On the kitchen counter sat an empty Starbucks cup with lipstick on the rim. The brand name printed across it felt like a signature. I stood there staring at it for a full minute before I picked it up and threw it away. But I could still smell her perfume faintly in the air. That night, I called Ethan. He told me to go to the police, but I didn't. I knew how that would sound. My ex left a coffee cup in my house. No evidence, no witness, just my word against her silence. Jessica was too careful for that. She never left proof, only impressions. Psychological fingerprints. I tried to shake it off, keep my head down. I started working late, staying out of the apartment as much as possible. I'd grab takeout from Chipotle, drive to the edge of town, and just sit in my car under the flickering lights of a 7-Eleven. The hum of the neon sign and the sound of passing cars became my company. For a while, it worked. The quiet started to feel safe again. Then one evening, I returned home and found my living room lights on. I froze in the doorway. I hadn't left them that way. My stomach turned cold as I stepped inside, scanning the space. Nothing looked out of place. But when I walked into the bedroom, my breath caught in my throat. On my nightstand, next to my phone, was a photo frame I'd thrown away weeks ago. The picture inside, Jessica smiling, her head resting on my shoulder. No note, no message, just that photo. She was reminding me that she could come and go as she pleased. Control wasn't something I had anymore. It was something she allowed me to think I had. And the most terrifying part was that I could feel it. She was getting closer again. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom after that night. The idea of lying there, with that photo on the nightstand, knowing she'd stood exactly where I was standing, it crawled under my skin. I moved to the couch, keeping the lights dim and my shoes nearby, just in case I needed to leave in a hurry. But the longer I stayed awake, the more I realized something worse. Jessica wasn't just trying to scare me. She was trying to make me feel what she'd felt when I left her. Trapped, uncertain, helpless. I decided to fight back in the only way I could, by turning invisible. I changed my routines, stopped posting online, swapped my morning runs for late-night walks. I wanted to make her lose the rhythm of me. But even when I disappeared from the world, I couldn't escape the sense that she was a few steps ahead. A week later, I came home from work and saw a white envelope taped to my door. My name was written across it in her handwriting. Precise, almost elegant. Inside was a single note that said, "You can't hide from what's inside you." No threats, no anger, just those words. I stood there, staring at them, until I felt something shift, not fear this time, but exhaustion. She was right in a way. I'd been running not just from her, but from the version of myself that had allowed her into my life in the first place. That night, I drove out to the lake. It was the same place we'd gone years ago, the night she told me she loved me for the first time. The water was still, the moon hanging low enough to see my reflection perfectly. I thought about how love had turned into obsession, how affection had curdled into possession. Somewhere along the way, I'd become both her mirror and her ghost. As I sat there, headlights appeared behind me. A car slowed to a stop, and for a moment, I thought it was her. My hands clenched the steering wheel, waiting. But the car just passed, disappearing into the dark. Still, it left me with a question that wouldn't go away. What if this was all she wanted? For me to think about her every time I looked over my shoulder? When I got home, the photo on my nightstand was gone. Just gone. That's when I knew she'd been back again. Only this time, she didn't leave something behind. She took something with her. The morning after the photo disappeared, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in months, my phone buzzing with a notification. The message wasn't from an unknown number this time. It was from her old contact name. "You finally understand," it said. I stared at it for a long time before realizing what she meant. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about connection. Even if it came through fear, she still wanted a thread tying us together. And by reacting, I'd given it to her. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off my phone, packed a small bag, and left the apartment without looking back. I didn't have a clear plan, just a direction. I drove west, past the outskirts of town, through miles of open highway. The radio played softly, the air felt cleaner, and for the first time in weeks, my thoughts stopped looping around her name. But even out there, in the middle of nowhere, the silence carried her echo. At a small gas station off the interstate, I stopped for coffee. The cashier, a kid barely out of high school, asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, but when I looked at my reflection in the plexiglass barrier, I barely recognized myself. Tired eyes, stubble, a face haunted by a love that had long since died. As I left, I noticed something on the windshield. A small note, pressed under the wiper. My chest tightened as I unfolded it. "You can keep running," it read, "but you'll always drive in circles." I don't know how she found me. Maybe she'd followed me for days, or maybe she never had to. Maybe she just knew me too well. That's when I realized what this had become. It wasn't a chase anymore. It was a ritual. She wasn't trying to catch me. She wanted me to keep moving, to never stop thinking about her, because as long as I was running, she still existed. When I got back into the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, watching the horizon, until the light began to fade. Somewhere out there, she was watching too, convinced she still had control. But in that moment, I understood the truth. Freedom wasn't about escaping her. It was about no longer needing to react. I crumpled the note, tossed it out the window, and whispered to myself, "It ends here." And for the first time, I meant it.